The other point I'll make here is that kleos in the Iliad is human. It's something that humans get. The gods cannot, they do not get glory. It's in the same way. Because of this crucial distinction of mortality. So the gods are athanatoi, or the deathless ones. So thanatos is death. So, Thanos from Marvel Comics, the is kind of, etymologically related to this Greek for Thanatos. So Greek for death is Thanatos, and athanatoi means they're deathless. They're without death. So the A is like our it's a privative. So they are undying. And humans are thanatoi. They are the dying ones. So that's the crucial distinction between mortals and immortals. And the gods provide this contrast that highlights and sharpens the sense of the human condition as fundamentally tied to their fact that they die. I want to mention now this notion of Aristeia. We'll see it a couple times. So it's a prevalent feature in the Iliad. It's a bit in the Aeneid as well. I don't think any of the books I had you read really shows that, but it's in the Aeneid as well in the other books. But it's tied to this word best or excellence, and it's the excellence of a warrior in their kind of their most shining brilliance of being warlike. And Achilles' Aristeia, for instance, is the culmination of the poem. But there are other Aristeia, including that of Diomedes, Agamemnon, Hector, Patroclus. And here are some components. I won't go through these. I'll let you read those. And not all of these are in every Aristeia, okay? But it's a type scene. It's a type of scene where a hero will be shown as, let's say, inspired by a god or goddess to this height of warlike prowess that no one can stop them, not even gods on the other side to some extent. And they go on this kind of killing rampage for a while. And it's a type scene because it's going to have the same structure in different versions. So when Achilles does it, it has a similar structure, and Diomedes does it as similar structure, what have you, and it's tied to that kind of oral formulaic theory, right? Remember the oral formulaic theory of how oral poems would be composed would be around the poet saying, okay, well, I'm going to have Achilles do a lot of good stuff today, and Achilles is going to arm himself, and I know all the things to say when someone gets armed. So they put on the well-ironed greaves and blah, 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 and I got the rhymes all set for that, and I don't have to think about that too much. And then I'm going to talk about the breastplate and how it got lapsed on tight and it shined and gleamed. And then I'm going to talk about the helmet and how the crest waved, etc. So there's those elements that can be repeated for each with lines that can be repeated, and then the elements themselves can be plugged in as needed to, let's say, stretch out a story. So I'm saying, okay, well, I want to do the Aristeia of Achilles. I think in this particular sitting, I got some time to kill here. I've got a bit more time. People don't seem to be getting tired around the campfire, so to speak. So I'm going to pull in an arming. I'm going to do the prowess. I'm going to get them wounded for a bit, and then I'm going to have them return, and then I'm going to have the battle over a fallen enemy. Sometimes different mixes are there, but not all elements. Okay, but those are the general elements that you'll see in this one of these Aristeia. So the gods in the Iliad, I want to talk about that quickly. Obviously, they play an important role. So the gods, the one thing I want to say, the gods are concrete and real agents in the story, right? So some people will try to say they're kind of, you try to explain them away, right? They're metaphors or something like that, okay? Because we live in a godless age, I hate to say it, we don't believe that there are these elemental beings that are out there that control cosmic forces. So when you have people who do movies, for instance, of the Iliad or the Odyssey. So there was, I think I referenced this movie called Troy that came out maybe 10 or 15 years ago with Brad Pitt as Achilles. So an interesting movie. I encourage you to see it. I thought it was pretty good, but it had to take a modern stance at it, right? So it had to say, well, what are we going to do with these gods, right? People might not buy that. Okay, so there's no gods there at all, really, as far as I can remember. And then, so that's one approach, is to just take it, okay, well, every time they referenced gods, it was just a metaphor for something else. Okay, so for instance, here's one way of taking that would be in book 1, it says, the narrator says that Athena stopped Achilles from killing Agamemnon, because they're fighting and they're discussing in the council, and they're kind of arguing. And Achilles doesn't suffer fools, and he's such a a tough warrior. You're really taking your life into your own hands if you're getting him very angry. So it shows him reaching for his sword, and his thought crossed his mind that he's going to go and kill Agamemnon. And then Athena stopped him and grabbed him by the hair, or grabbed him somewhere. So Athena, if you want to take that metaphorically and take the gods out of it, is to say, well, it's just a metaphor for what she stands for. It's a metaphor for wisdom. So Athena, let's say, in one aspect, is a god of wisdom. And then, so Achilles' wisdom made him think better of it. So it was, for that reason, he did not kill Agamemnon. So you can take the gods. Some people have tried to argue this. I disagree. I don't think you can. If you read Homer, some people would say, okay, well, you can do that with every instance of the gods, that they're just metaphors for, let's say, human drives or natural forces. But there are a lot of, as I say in the second sub-bullet there's many times where such an explanation is simply impossible. It just doesn't work. So Aphrodite physically removes Paris from the battlefield in book 3. So Aphrodite's love or passion, but we can't really say that physically moved Paris from the battlefield. He's physically whisked away. People see him disappear. It's not a metaphor. It's a physical intervention. The other point I'll just say is that, and it goes to a point I've been talking about in terms of mortality, but in general, they offer a contrast with human affairs, and to really underscore the meaning of human existence. I'll just point out too, the English term God is used to translate the Greek term theos, but we can't equate it with other notions of God that we might have. Okay, so other notions that we have let's say in the modern world that's had a legacy of kind of the Judeo-Christian or Islamic worldview in the West and other parts of the world, have certain notions of God and baggage around it that we need to kind of forget. Okay, so they're not moral. So the gods are not consistently good or merciful or just. The gods are not omniscient, so they know more than humans, but they don't know everything. They're not omnipotent. Okay, so omniscience means knowing everything. Omnipotent means they're all powerful. So they're not all powerful. Okay, they're very powerful, but they're not all powerful. They are not transcendent. Okay, so they do not exist in a realm beyond the physical. They exist within the universe. They exist in the physical universe, and they didn't create it. They're part of it. Okay. They are not loving. They love particular human beings that, they're special favorites. Often it's a child that they had with a human mother or something like that, as in the case of Sarpedon. But they otherwise, it's not as though they're caring for human beings. So we have to get all of those kind of moral and transcendental notions of God out of our head when we're thinking about the Greek gods. So what they are is rather kind of extensions of kind of anthropomorphized forces of nature that came up to embody other aspects and attributes and have stories attached to them. So their character started to build up as these stories attached to them, but basically in kind of the unfolding of Greek religion, it was these anthropomorphizations of nature's forces of nature. And in the Iliad, we get this, let's say, double view of the gods. We get from the point of the humans, the gods are awe-inspiring, they're dangerous, they're powerful, but the epic also, let's say, pulls back the veil and shows them as they are, as these kind of petty and trivial beings to some extent, right? They're weak, they change, they have these petty squabbles among one another. They're undignified, the scene that we'll talk about in the next lecture of Zeus being seduced by Hera is kind of this undignified portrait of these, these gods. And they're not always portrayed as so petty. They're not this petty or shallow in the Odyssey. So why here? And I think one answer I would say, why does Homer portray them so lightly here, is to really shine a light, I would say, on how this contrast between the mortal and the immortal, and how the immortal is in a way insignificant and kind of can be laughed at, and all the tragedy and meaning is in the choices around a finite human existence. As Achilles, there's some lines from Achilles here from book 22, in his confrontation with Apollo. Now you've robbed me of great glory, saved their lives with all your deathless ease. Nothing for you to fear, no punishment to come. So you did it with deathless ease. You've robbed me of my glory, but that was nothing to you. That didn't mean anything, So the epic really shines a light on the nobility and beauty, let's say, proper to human existence that way. As I said, the gods, when they participate in human conflict, it really highlights the insignificance of their actions. I mentioned Aphrodite is taunted after she's wounded by Diomedes. Ares, very similarly, he's wounded by Diomedes as well. Apollo kicks down the Greek walls, and it's as though he's a child kicking down a sandcastle. So for them, interaction is childlike, it's playful, it's inconsequential. Another thing I'll point to is when they battle one another, that there's similar outcome. There's book one has this scene of kind of domestic bickering, and but it ends with they go to bed, they're fine, they make peace and make up, and it's this scene of domestic bickering and peace is in contrast with the really significant war that's going between Greeks and Trojans, and what's totally at stake there is lives of many, and many will be sold into slavery, what have you. So heroes. So we've talked kind of about the distinction between Greek immortals, the gods, and mortals, and heroes represent this kind of in-between space between gods and mortals. So the heroes are godlike in their ability to be preeminent and transcend the human fray in their domain of activity. So that they're godlike, and they're often portrayed by the narrator as godlike, with the one proviso that they're still mortal. So Helen and Achilles, I would say, are most consistently portrayed as godlike. One in the field of, let's say, beauty and love, and kind of the realm of the city and peace, and then in the realm of war and bringing death, it's Achilles. So you have these two heroes as kind of conduits between the gods and mortals. I wanted to say a word too about fate. I mentioned that in passing. So part of what's proper to humans is that they're mortal, that their life is finite, and it is a certain portion. Okay, so the lot of my life is a certain length of time that has been allotted to me. That's this Greek notion of fate. Okay, so in Greek, it's moira is the Greek word for fate, which means share or portion. So mereology is the study of parts in relation to whole. So a part or a portion is from this Greek term for moira, or part or portion. And it's, as I said, so it can be your fate, and when it's applied to humans, it's also, let's say, the share or portion of your life. In the diagram there, we have, of course, the three great fates, Clotho, who spins the yard, the cloth of, or the thread of one's life, and Lachesis, who's is the apportioner who measures out the portion that will be one's life, and then Atropos is the one who does the cutting, that violent act of saying it must end here. Okay, so this is very much the kind of the Greek sense of that you have that portion of existence that is proper to one and is allotted to them, and you can't transcend that. The gods and fate. Now, it's a complicated relationship. So the gods seem to know what humans' fates are, like what has been apportioned to them. For instance, Zeus knows that Achilles must kill Hector, and it will happen. But they can't change fates. It's not as though they can go in. Again, remember, they're not transcendent. They're not all powerful. So Thetis cannot change Achilles' fates. There's an interesting sequence later in the Iliad where Zeus considers intervening to help Sarpedon, but it's made clear that he can't really do that. So with that, I'd like to close the lecture on books 2 to 9. I don't see any comments or questions, but I'll wait for a second if there's any comments or questions on the preceding. Seeing none, we'll close it there. As I said, next time we're going to, well, the next lecture is already pre-recorded for books 10 to 17. So there'll be a summary of books 10 to 15. We'll look at books 16 and 17, where we see the death of Patroclus. I see a hand there, Caleb.
Yeah, sorry, Professor. So I have a question. It's more concerning to Achilles, and in terms of him fighting versus him not fighting. So you mentioned that his mother had told him that if he went to fight, yes, he would have honor, but at the end of the day, he would have a short life. Versus if he doesn't fight, he doesn't have any honor, but he has a longer life. So my question is, if even though he knew, why did he still, like, what drew him to want to fight?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, it's good to reflect on. I don't think there's an easy answer. The full kind of consideration of the answer would be around this heroic ideal, right? This heroic ideal of the Greeks that life is only worth living if it does have a certain sense of honor, and that, remember we read that passage in book 6 of we just read it in this lecture, how Hector says, he'd rather die than have shame of the community, because he did not fight to try to preserve it. So there's that, and this sense that it's what makes life worth meaningful anyway, right? So his life is going to be long, but it's still going to be, it's going to have a certain length of existence, and then he's going to die, right? Like all of us, right? We're all going to die, and what's going to give it meaning? So in the Greek warrior ethos, in a lot of ways, it gives it meaning in relation to the honor and brilliant deeds that one can achieve as a warrior. Mind you, that seems to be the outset. That seems to be what drives Achilles. But as we saw in book 9, he seems to renounce that, right? He says, well, actually, I don't know, maybe I would take long life, right? The embassy to Achilles doesn't get him back. They offer him honor and glory. It doesn't get him back. What we'll see, what gets him back later, is the death of Patroclus. and revenge gets him back. So another driving motive, let's say. So he wants to go and fight because he wants to kill Hector, because he's feeling so much grief at loss. So it's another side, another dimension of the confrontation with mortality. Okay, so if I'm looking at my own death, if I'm looking at my own life as being finite, I say, well, what gives it meaning? Well, maybe a life of honor, maybe not. I don't know. I asked that question, and Achilles asks that question in a way in book 9. And then also, okay, well, but I'm also losing loved ones. And how can I have meaning in my existence when I'm losing these loved ones and their life is also finite? And so one kind of answer is revenge, and I'm going to kill Hector, and I'm going to drag his body around in the dust. And then finally, I think what we see in book 24 is he has to have this aha moment, and him in this incredible scene with Priam that we'll read, he has to come to accept that he will die, and maybe it's got meaning, maybe it doesn't. And he has to accept that his friends and loved ones will die, including Patroclus, and that that's just the way of existence. And that Priam has to accept that Hector and all his other sons died and will die. So that's a bit of an answer. I hope it's a start, but do you have a follow-up question there, Caleb?
Yeah. So concerning that, can we then say that there's like a parallel between when we hear about this in book 9 to when we see him again in the underworld, when he's talking about how he would much rather be like a serf and work the land than to rule the underworld? So does that also mean that he didn't really want to fight, like he's regretting that he took the fight? Or do you think that he would have been happier if he had, like, not fought and still ended up dying?
Yeah, it's good. Well, I'm not sure. I don't know if we'll ever have an answer to that latter question, like about whether he would have been happier. I think I think what's consistent between the Odyssey portrayal of him and book 9 is this notion that he questions whether it's worth it. Okay, so in book 9 he says, like, you can give me all these awards, you can say I'm great and everything like that, but if I die, it's no good, and what worth is it? And it's not worth my life, right? So he actually raises that question. And then in the Odyssey, as you said, right, in the Odyssey in the underworld, he says something very similar. I'd rather be alive than to be king of the underworld. So what really drives him there, as I said, it's what we see in the Iliad. What drives him is this combination of a drive for honor, but also revenge. This sense of loss of other loved ones, and can I repay Hector for doing that? But also this question of whether or not honor and glory is everything. He questions it. He doesn't completely dismiss it. Like, he doesn't get the ships and go home, right? He still wants to stay there and have some glory and honor, I think you could say.
Okay, thank you. That was it.
So those are good questions, Caleb. Thank you very much. And unless there are other questions, okay, great. Let's adjourn then, and I'll see everyone for next Monday's lecture. As I mentioned, the Wednesday lecture is already there, pre-recorded. Have a great night.